Drift into a world where every dream is a spoonful of wonder, and every night brings a sweet new story. Welcome to Desert Tribe Dreams, a sleep-time journey through sugary valleys, caramel clouds, and the fantastical lives of the most unusual desert tribes ever imagined. Tuck in, close your eyes, and let tales of magical lands, melting moons, and harmonious flavors carry you softly toward the sweetest sleep. Your adventure in the Sweetlands begins here, one bedtime story at a time. If you love drifting off to the magical rhythms of the Sweetlands, be sure to subscribe and join our cozy community of dreamers. Share your sweetest thoughts and favorite desert tribe in the comments below. Long before the world mapped its continents and named its oceans, there existed a sprawling, fantastical expanse known only as the Sweetlands. This magical terrain was unlike any other, carpeted not with grass or stone, but with endless, rolling dunes of powdered sugar, rivers of molten caramel, and forests whose trees bore fruits both peculiar and magnificent. Here, the land itself pulsed with color, exuding the sense of vanilla and exotic spices that carried with the gentle breeze. Into this world, the desert tribes were born. The earliest records, etched into brittle honeycomb and preserved in the deepest caves of Toffee Mountain, speak of the whipped cream nomads. These ethereal people, their skin as pale as the mist atop freshly baked meringues, wandered the Sweetlands in great floating caravans spun from cloud-like marshmallow silk. The nomads were pacifists by nature, shunning the rigid structures of settlement in favor of the wind's whimsical guidance. Each year, as the seasons melted from strawberry spring to cinnamon autumn, they traced invisible paths through fields of speckled vanilla bean, gathering and trading spoils, fragrant lemon zest, crystalline sugar pearls, and the legendary golden starfruit, whose juice fueled their legendary airships. The nomads' language was as ephemeral as their existence. Songs comprised of high, fluttering notes and gentle sibilant whispers carried only as far as a soft exhalation. Far across the candied weald, beyond licorice thickets and turbinado sandbanks, resided the marzipan artisans, a tribe renowned for their devotion to creation. The artisans' villages resembled sprawling galleries, each home sculpted from rich almond paste and adorned with intricate patterns dyed in beetroot and saffron. The Marzipanians honored a goddess known as Palinea, the shaper of sweets, who, according to legend, crafted the first marzipan figure from a handful of almond meal and the tears of a gentle sun. Life among the artisans was a competition between delicacy and durability. Each spring, after the ritual planting of candied violets, the young underwent the trial of the mold. For 7 days and 7 sticky nights, they worked to sculpt a creature or tale from only what the earth offered. The most talented would see their works enshrined in the Great Gallery, a domed palace at the heart of the city, whose walls gleamed pale golden in morning's light. To the east, cradled by the mirror-like stillness of butterscotch marshes, arose the enigmatic custard seers. Clad in robes woven from spun sugar and dyed with saffron, the seers held court beneath immense jelly bean pillars, their mystic temples rising from islands of crystallized ginger. It was said that the future itself swirled in their golden eyes, faces forever calm as they traced designs in the shallow cups of pale custard, foretelling harvests and omens in the shifting patterns of vanilla seeds. The seers were philosophers and scientists in equal measure. Their greatest invention, the chrono spoon, could suspend a moment in time, preserving a savory breeze or trapping the echo of a laugh within a sphere of burned sugar. When great decisions faced the tribes, envoys traveled for days through thick marsh mists to seek the visions of the seers. Sometimes these visions were clear. More often, they were as obscure as the caramel mists at dawn, leading to new traditions of story and song as the people pondered their mysteries. Spanning the gleaming rainbow steppes, the world's only mountain range constructed entirely from interwoven layers of pastry and molten sugar, lived the Macaron Guild, a tribe bound by balance. where the whipped cream nomads drifted and the marzipan artisans shaped. The guild's purpose was unity, reconciling the endless array of flavors and colors into harmonious existence. Among the towering circular stacks of pistachio green, rose pink, and deep chocolate brown, guild members trained as bridge makers, adept both in diplomacy and dessert. Their greatest celebration, the Festival of Flavors, blossomed each equinox. It was a time of wild experimentation. Yuzu paired with black sesame, taro with lavender, and elderflower with salted caramel. Triumphs echoed through the mountains in song, while failed pairings were honored as lessons. The guild's wisdom kept the sweetlands in accord, infusing each corner with the joy and tolerance found in the art of harmonious contrast. Not all was peace in the sweetlands, for lurking by the stormy outskirts was a group both feared and admired, the salted caramel marauders. Born from the union of briny wind and candied fire, these folk wore coats of gleaming caramel lacquer, bristling with crystallized salt crystals that glimmered like armor. Their tailies are legendary pirate kings and queens who sailed battered gingerbread galleons across the sea of cream, fighting for freedom, for gold leaf treasure, and above all, for the thrill of the wild unknown. Their customs were complex and coded, a salute by dashing a pinch of salt overhead, a blood brotherhood sealed in burnt caramel, a vocabulary of nautical knots and secret recipes. Though lawless in reputation, the marauders enforced a strict code: honor, ingenuity, and the sharing of spoils with orphan children and wandering minstrels. The Sweetlands never quite conquered them, but in every home, a lullaby or warning whispered with their name. Above the clouds, in spires of spun sugar spiraling towards the sun, were the meringue watchers. The watchers, said to descend from the sky themselves, kept vigil over all the tribes. Their hair was tangled air, their bones delicate lattice of egg and golden light. Each moonrise, as the world below sparkled with dewdrops of melted chocolate, the watchers sent their signals, patterns traced in midnight cocoa dust, heartfelt wishes flung on breezes scented with mint. Silent, enigmatic, and revered, the watchers dared never to meddle, believing that only observation, recording, and preservation ensured the Sweetland survival. Their libraries, invisible to all but the most persistent seekers, contained the stories of every tribe, every flavor, every life. Certainly. Here is part 2 of the long, original, and richly descriptive narration about the history and lives of the strange and unique dessert tribes, continuing seamlessly from where we left off. Long after the meringue watchers had set their silent vigil over the Sweetlands, the tribe's lives continued to intertwine in ways both subtle and profound. The wind chime pipers, a lesser-known nomadic tribe, began their emergence from the peppermint plains. These enchanting wanderers carried their stories on gentle breezes, their voices mingling with the soft tinkling of crystal candy chimes that dangled from their garments and tents. The pipers were known not for their physical might or craftsmanship, but for their profound ability to soothe troubled hearts and calm brewing storms, both metaphorical and literal. Wherever they passed, the landscape blossomed briefly with sugar-petal flowers, and anxious souls found respite in their melodies. The wind chime piper's origins were whispered to trace back to an ancient melding of the whipped cream nomads' airy flights and the custard seer's timeless wisdom. Their songs were said to hold forgotten spells, capable of stitching breaks in the fabric of reality or mending fractured alliances between tribes. This unique gift often made them indispensable emissaries during times of conflict, though their intervention was always accepted with cautious reverence, for their true motivations remained shrouded in mystery. Meanwhile, across the crystalline expanse of the licorice crystal caves, the enigmatic shadow sugarmancers practiced their arcane arts in secret. Their power was born from the bittersweet balance of light and darkness, drawing on the dualities of heated molasses and cooled icing. Legends spoke of their ephemeral figures, cloaked in shimmering black fondant, weaving shadows into tangible shapes that danced like flames amid the sugar-coated stalactites. The sugarmancers were both feared and coveted for their rare ability to transmute ordinary dessert elements into powerful artifacts. Enchanted spoons that could stir memories, enchanted molds that formed protective shells, and enchanted syrups that could alter moods. Despite the natural wariness between tribes, a fragile alliance often formed when the sugarmancers lent their powers to the Macaron Guild's bridgemakers or the marzipan artisan sculptors. Such collaborations birthed masterpieces and occasionally new dangers, blurring the lines between creation and destruction. Their motivations, like the shadows they commanded, were elusive, oscillating between benevolence and self-interest. In the farthest reaches beyond the Sea of Cream, where the frothy waves crashed upon shores of spun sugar sand, thrived the pebble taffy gatherers. Unlike the nomadic or artisan tribes, these tenacious clans lived embedded within the sugarstone formations that jutted from the sea, harvesting rare taffy resources bound tightly to the sweet mineral veins. Their lives were marked by grueling labor and fierce territorial pride, but also unparalleled resilience and innovation. Ingenious devices, created from hardened toffee and bent caramel conduits, allowed them to harvest with precision and speed, preserving the fragile balance of their environment. The pebble taffy gatherers told stories carved into the very sugarstone walls of their homes, a chronicle of survival and triumph against winds sharpened with sea salt and storms heavy with cotton candy clouds. Their songs were rhythmic, the cadence of hoofbeats against rocky shorelines and the pulsing heartbeat of taffy's slow stretch. Deep down, they nurtured hopes of joining the wider Sweetlands community, though their harsh lifestyle and isolated position often kept them apart. Amid these varied lives, the salted caramel marauders continued their daring exploits, their legend growing not just in tales, but in the tangible marks left across the coasts and skies. A pivotal moment in their history came with a legendary storm of butterscotch, when a tempest unlike any other battered the Sweetlands for 7 days and nights. The marauders, leveraging their expertise with salted caramel's tough yet flexible properties, crafted daring life-saving rafts and shelters, rescuing dozens of stranded travelers from other tribes. In doing so, they earned not only wary respect, but the seeds of tentative friendship that began to dissolve long-held rivalries. Yet the Sweetlands were never static. Rumblings beneath the rainbow steps heralded an awakening, a mysterious force stirring from the layers of pastry and sugar. The Macaron Guild sensed this with growing unease, their bridge-makers convening in urgent council. Rumors spread of an ancient, forgotten tribe known as the Nougat Sentinels, whose legends spoke of binding the Sweetlands together or fracturing them forever. Their very existence was contested, a whispered myth or a lurking truth. As the moons waxed and waned, travelers and envoys from all tribes began venturing toward the heart of the Rainbow Steppes, seeking answers, allies, or weapons in the face of a future unknown, an unspoken question hanging thick in sugared air. Would the Sweetlands endure, or would their unique, delicate harmony crumble like an overbaked crust? As the stirrings beneath the Rainbow Steppes became more pronounced, the Sweetlands' delicate equilibrium began to tremble. The air grew thick with anticipation, and whispers spread of the Nougat Sentinels, those enigmatic guardians said to have been forged of the richest, most fortified nougat and charged with protecting the Sweetlands' deepest secrets. According to ancient tales murmured at twilight feasts, the Sentinels were guardians of a powerful core, the heart of sweetness, a colossal orb pulsing with a light so pure it embodied the essence of all flavors, colors, and life itself. It was said that the heart of sweetness lay buried deep within the marmalade catacombs beneath the Rainbow Steppes, a secret repository of ancient knowledge and untold magic. Many believed the Sentinels had gone into a deep slumber after a cataclysmic event, their duty suspended until the Sweetlands faced a great trial. The newfound tremors were taken by some as sign that the time of awakening was near. Driven by a mixture of hope and fear, Envoys from the major tribes convened at the base of the rainbow steps. Bridges were built anew, not just of gesture, but of sincere intent. The Macaran Guild's bridge-makers worked tirelessly to facilitate dialogue between the cautious, salted caramel marauders and the more insular pebble taffy gatherers, weaving a fragile tapestry of trust. The whipped cream nomads floated nearby, their airy presence a reminder of the softness and lightness upon which the Sweetlands thrived, while from the shadows, the sugarmancers watched silently, their intentions inscrutable. Among the envoys was a young custard seer named Lyra, gifted with the rare ability to glimpse fleeting visions, not only of the future, but of potential pasts and alternative presents. She carried with her the chronospoon, an artifact bestowed by her elders to aid in delicate negotiations and decisions. Lyra's visions had told her of the fragile line upon which all their lives balanced, a line that could either lead to a radiant dawn or a shattering twilight. As the negotiations unfolded, the pebble taffy gatherers shared their knowledge of the marmalade catacombs, describing ancient glyphs carved in honeycomb and guarded by crystalline golems of spun sugar. The marauders offered pledges of protection for travelers daring enough to explore these depths, swearing to uphold codes both old and new. The artisans and guild members debated what to craft should the sentinels awaken. Shields forged of candied almonds, weapons shaped from tempered caramel, or perhaps instruments of peace and understanding. Meanwhile, high above the gathering, the Marang watchers kept silent vigil. One among them, a luminous figure named Irwin, descended to commune with Lyra in a quiet garden of crystallized mint leaves. Their conversation, carried on breezes scented with peppermint and softened sugar, touched on the burden of knowledge and the hope that the tribes might find unity before a reckoning forced their hand. The following days brimmed with preparation and reflection. The wind chime pipers played melodies woven with hope and caution, their harmonies carrying across the sugar plains and into the folds of caramel-coated hills. The custard seers held ceremonies, dipping golden spoons into pools of rich vanilla custard, seeking guidance from patterns that shimmered and shifted like the fate of their world. At last, a delegation assembled, ready to descend into the marmalade catacombs to awaken, or perhaps confront, the nougat sentinels. Among them were representatives from all factions: bridge makers, marauders, artisans, seers, gatherers, and singers, bound together by a fragile hope. Their journey promised to be perilous, their challenges unknown, but the fate of the Sweetlands rested in their hands. Thus began a new chapter in the saga, a story of unity and struggle, of flavors entwined and fates converging, in a land where the sweet and the strange were forever inseparable. The descent into the marmalade catacombs was like entering a realm suspended between reality and reverie, where the essence of the Sweetlands bloomed in crystallized forms and echoes of ancient sweetness whispered through every cavern. The tunnel walls glowed softly under the golden luster of embedded sugar crystals, casting a warm honeyed light on the faces of the delegation, a diverse group united by hope, yet shadowed by uncertainty. Lyra, the young custard seer, gripped the chronospoon tightly as they stepped forward, her golden eyes reflecting the luminous depths of the cavern. Around her, the bridge makers lent steady hands, guiding the cautious members from the pebble taffy gatherers and the salted caramel marauders, whose fierce loyalty was tempered by the solemnity of the moment. The artisans' delicate fingers traced protective sigils carved into their garments, while the wind chime pipers' soft melodies barely rose above a whisper, their crystalline chimes evoking a gentle harmony with the cavern's pulse. As the group ventured deeper, the air thickened with the scent of marmalade and nectar, mixing with a faint undercurrent of ancient knowledge. Massive chambers unfolded like pages in a colossal, caramelized manuscript, their ceilings dripping with amber stalactites, and their floors mosaic-ed with patterns forged from candied fruit and crystallized honeycomb. At the heart of the labyrinth, the delegation discovered a vast chamber, domed and radiant, where the heart of sweetness lay cradled in an elaborate lattice of nougat and spun sugar tendrils. The orb radiated a light soft and warm, a beacon that seemed to sing with the collective memory and spirit of all the dessert tribes. But as the delegation approached, the dormant nougat sentinels began to stir. These towering figures, sculpted from the densest and richest nougat, with veins of honeyed amber flowing beneath their surface, rose with a solemn grace. Their eyes, glowing softly with a light born of the heart itself, surveyed the assembled tribes not with suspicion, but with a patient awareness that commanded reverence. The sentinels spoke, not with words, but through pulses of light and subtle vibrations that Lyra translated with the aid of her chronospoon. They conveyed a message of balance and stewardship, reminding the dessert tribes of their sacred duty to guard the harmony of the sweetlands. The sentinel's awakening was both warning and invitation, that the fragile peace of the sweetlands must be actively preserved, or risk unraveling into bitter discord. In the days that followed, the delegation worked tirelessly alongside the sentinels to weave new bonds and restore ancient pacts. The Macaron Guild's bridge-makers and marzipan artisans collaborated to craft intricate nougat talismans, imbued with the custard seer's foresight and the sugarmancer's arcane shadow-weaving. These artifacts were designed to protect both body and spirit, serving as a reminder and shield against forces, natural or supernatural, that might threaten the Sweetlands' unity. Surfacing from the catacombs, the tribes carried with them a renewed sense of purpose and interconnectedness. The jelly bean pillars of the custard seers shimmered brighter with the infusion of nougat magic, serving as a rallying beacon for all to witness. The salted caramel marauders found themselves not just as outlaws of the stormy edges, but as valiant protectors whose daring actions had helped kindle this new era of collaboration. Back in the Pebble Taffy settlements, ancient songs gained fresh verses, celebrating the courage of those who ventured into the heart of sweetness. Their hardened laborers, inspired by the Alliance, adopted innovations shared by the marzipan artisans, blending craftsmanship with functionality in ways hitherto unimaginable. Meanwhile, high in the spires of spun sugar, where the meringue watchers dwelled, the library of sugared lights expanded to include new tomes chronicling this chapter of history, the tale of unity born amid threat, and of the fragile, enduring beauty of a world crafted from dreams and dessert. Yet the Sweetlands' serenity remained delicately poised, for whispers of distant, unfathomable forces began to ripple along the edges of this enchanted land. Rumors spoke of a hidden coven known only as the Bitter Bakers, exiles who had rejected the harmony of the tribes, embracing instead the harsh alchemy of bitterness, sourness, and spite. Their domain was said to lie beneath the shadowed crust, a forbidding region where once the Sweetlands' foundation had cracked and the very essence of sweetness had been challenged. The Bitter Bakers were masters of corruption and decay, utilizing scalding vinegar lakes, brambles of burnt sugar, and frostings laced with malice. Their bitter confections, once crafted only for private revenge, had begun to seep into the wider Sweetlands, threatening the delicate balance of flavors and alliances. Their motivations remained obscured, a mixture of lost hope, dark ambition, and ancient grievances, nourished by a desire not merely to reshape, but to unmake the Sweetlands. In response, the dessert tribes convened a great council atop the Rainbow Steps, a summit unprecedented in scale and importance. Delegates from every tribe, nomads, artisans, seers, marauders, gatherers, pipers, watchers, and even the elusive sugarmancers, gathered beneath an archway woven from spun sugar and crystallized candied citrus. The air was thick with nervous energy, sweet incense, and the flickering glow of caramel candles. The council's deliberations unfolded in cycles of days and nights, blending voice and melody, reason and ritual. The wind chime pipers offered songs of caution and hope. The marzipan artisans proposed ceremonies to heal rancorous wounds, while the Macaron Guild's bridge makers negotiated alliances and peace accords beyond mere politics. a weaving of flavors and hearts into a vibrant tapestry. The salted caramel marauders pledged their fleets and cunning in a new defense pact, while the pebble taffy gatherers shared innovations in fortification and resource management. Custard seers offered visions of possible futures, radiant or ruinous, challenging each delegation to choose their path wisely. The meringue watchers stood poised, ready to chronicle and safeguard the outcomes. A plan emerged to send a united expedition beyond the known edges of the Sweetlands into the shadowed crust, the domain of the bitter bakers. This mission was fraught with peril, yet it was seen as essential to confront the creeping bitterness before it could overwhelm the lands of sweetness and joy. Many volunteered, their hearts burning with a mix of fear and determination. Among them was Ira, a young apprentice of the Sugarmancers, whose mastery of shadow and light offered a unique asset in the coming struggle. Alongside her was Bran, a stalwart marauder captain, whose fiercely loyal crew had saved countless lives during the storm of Butterscotch. Lyra, too, was chosen to guide the mission with her foresight and compassion. Their journey would test not only their skills, but the bonds forged through the trials of the gathering. The path into the shadowed crust was treacherous. Caramelized lava flows cooled into glassy venom, sour winds carrying echoes of bitterness and despair, and thickets of thorny candied rosemary that could slice as surely as blades. Yet the hopes of all desert tribes rested with that intrepid band. Meanwhile, the Sweetlands prepared for what might come. Villages learned from one another, sharing traditions and techniques with newfound openness. Festivals blazed across the land with renewed fervor, celebrations not just of flavor, but of unity, resilience, and the indefinable magic that bound them all. As the expedition plunged into darkness, the rest of the Sweetlands held their breath, lighting candles and singing ancient songs, their voices rising to meet the silent stars. The story of the desert tribes continued, an epic unfolding in flavors and shadows, triumph and trial, sweet promise and bitter challenge. And thus, the delicate dance of the Sweetlands continued, where every crumb held a story, every drop of syrup a memory, and every tribe, no matter how strange or unique, was part of a larger, endlessly unfolding tapestry. The expedition into the shadowed crust moved forward with caution, the crisp air tinged with an unsettling blend of scorched sugar and sour ash. The once vibrant sweetness of the Sweetlands gave way to a landscape steeped in morose shadows, where jagged shards of burnt sugar jutted like broken teeth, beneath a sky perpetually veiled in a haze of bitter gray. The adventurers, Ira, Bran, Lyra, and their companions, pressed on through winding passages lined with warped toffee vines that writhed softly, their edges serrated with crystalline spikes. Each step deeper revealed the stark reality of the bitter baker's realm. Here, sweetness had been twisted and corrupted. Ribbons of scalding vinegar flowed alongside pools of curdled cream, and blackened cookie crumbles littered the ground like shattered dreams. The bitter wind whispered with malice, carrying echoes of forgotten grievances and simmering resentment. Ira's mastery of shadow and light became crucial, crafting flickering veils of darkness to cloak their passage and weaving soft glimmers of light to counter the oppressive gloom. Bran's seasoned hand guided their makeshift fleet through treacherous caramelized ravines, while Lyra's visions, fleeting and fragmented, offered glimpses of unseen pitfalls and fleeting moments of hope. The wind chime pipers trailed behind, their delicate melodies of balm against despair, stitching fragile threads of courage through the group's collective spirit. The party soon encountered signs that the bitter bakers were not simply hoarding bitterness, but wielding it as a weapon. Twisted confectionery guardians, constructs of hardened molasses and acrid licorice, stood sentinel over key passages, their jagged forms oozing dark syrup that sizzled upon contact. The Sugarmancers among the group learned swiftly, countering these fiendish creations with spells blending light, shadow, and the ancient sweets of the Sweetlands. Deeper still, the group discovered the remnants of a once proud settlement. now reduced to ash-coated ruins and a ghostly silence. In the center stood a shattered statue of a figure molded from caramel and spun sugar, its features eroded, but the eyes still gleaming faintly with warmth. Lyra discerned faint traces of a story, woven into the fading inscription, a tale of loss and exile, of a schism that birthed the bitter bakers from among the tribes who once guarded the Sweetlands' harmony. The deeper mystery emerged. The bitter bakers had not always been exiles or enemies. They were descendants of a faction that had sought change by embracing the harsher flavors of life, ultimately splintering due to their refusal to follow the path of balance. Their bitterness grew, fueled by resentment and a corrosive belief that sweetness was fragile and naive. Faced with this revelation, the expedition's purpose deepened. No longer solely rescuers or warriors, they were emissaries of potential reconciliation, tasked with bridging divides seemingly carved into the very fabric of their land. Lyra's visions grew clearer, but more complex, revealing shadows within her own people's history and the intertwined destinies of all desert tribes. At the core of the bitter baker's stronghold lay the Oven of Reclamation, a vast furnace capable of both purging corruption and forging unlikely alliances. The group realized that to heal the Sweetlands, this furnace might be key, a source of regeneration if wielded with wisdom, or an instrument of devastation in reckless hands. Tensions rose as internal doubts and old prejudices simmered among the group. Bran, ever the pragmatist, urged caution and strength, wary of trusting those steeped in bitterness. Ira's affinity for shadow encouraged understanding of complexity rather than fear. Lyra, guided by visions and the steady pulse of the chronospoon, sought a path of empathy and hope. In a climactic encounter within the heart of the stronghold, the team faced the bitter baker's leader, a figure both formidable and tragic, cloaked in dark frostings and wielding a whip of crystallized vinegar. Dialogue was woven with sharp barbs and unexpected candor. The leader challenged the Sweetlands' history and proposed a reckoning that would force all tribes to confront not just external threats but their own internal fractures. Amid tense negotiations, the Oven of Reclamation blazed to life, its molten core pulsing like a beacon, calling for renewal or destruction. The expedition members combined their unique gifts. The sugarmancers wove spells of both shadow and sweetness. The custard seers invoked visions of futures intertwined, and the Macaron Guild performed rituals embodying harmony. The salted caramel marauders and pebble taffy gatherers stood as guardians, the resolve unyielding. As the furnace's heat rose, the bitter energies began to transform. Bitterness melted and mingled with sweetness, forging a new essence that shimmered with possibility. The bitter baker's leader, witnessing this alchemy, shared a moment of reluctant acceptance, hinting at the fragile hope for reintegration and healing. Emerging from the shadowed crust, the expedition returned not as conquerors nor victims, but as harbingers of a new chapter, one marked by dialogue, understanding, and the shared stewardship of the Sweetlands' delicate balance. The tribes welcomed them with renewed celebrations, rich with flavors and stories that blended old rivalries with newfound alliances. Back in the Heartlands, the festivals shimmered with vibrant energy. Where the whipped cream nomads floated amid clouds scented with marigold, the marzipan artisans unveiled sculptures embodying unity, and the meringue watchers recorded this turning point in their endless chronicles. Yet the story of the desert tribes was far from complete. The Sweetlands, ever shifting under the weight of flavors and fate, promised more wonders, trials, and tales. In a world woven from sugar and dreams, every crumb held a mystery and every flavor a history, waiting for the next daring soul to taste, remember, and weave their own chapter in the ongoing epic of the desert tribes. In the wake of reconciliation with the bitter bakers and the return from the forbidding shadowed crust, the Sweetlands experienced a blossoming of unprecedented diversity in lifestyle and custom. The unity forged in adversity had not washed out the quirks and peculiarities from each tribe. Instead, it heightened them, and the Sweetlands pulsed with unique daily rituals, dreamlike routines, and eccentric social orders that defied ordinary logic. The days of the whipped cream nomads had always verged on the surreal. In their floating marshmallow caravans, routines were governed by the drifting winds. Waking hours were determined by the hue of sunlight filtering through sweet vapor. Some days stretched impossibly long, as if dreams lingered between the beating of time. Meals were caught midair, the nomads fishing for dew orbs that hung suspended in the mist, chasing them with butterfly nets woven of spun sugar. Their children grew adept at levitation, learning to sculpt pillow clouds and ride the air currents, only descending to the powdery earth for moonlit celebrations of wind and light. Rather than walking, they floated through life, wearing shoes dusted with vanilla bean powder that muffled every sound. Beneath the rainbow steps, the lifestyles of the Makaran Guild seemed an endless festival of balancing opposites. Their time was arranged not in hours, but in flavor cycles. Each cycle dictated new color palettes for garments, new taste combinations for meals, even the musical scale for the day's communal harmonies. Their homes were circular, doorless, and stacked in crossing layers, so that one's neighbor might appear above, beside, or below at any moment. Each family maintained a guest pastry, a small, ever-evolving dessert outside their threshold, symbolizing hospitality. To refuse a taste was considered the deepest rudeness. The guild engineered playful competitions. Who could balance the tallest tower of macarons? Who could create the softest ganache trampoline? And their children learned mathematics through the fractal geometry of layered pastry. The marzipan artisans, ever the strange sculptors, lived within edible galleries. Each day's breakfast might involve nibbling an old wall and patching it with new almond paste. Artists competed in secret for the most outlandish marzipan constructions. A spiral staircase in honor of the full moon made from pistachio and orange blossom, or a dancing menagerie of sugar-glazed swan figurines that paraded themselves across dinner tables in the evenings. Tradition dictated that each artisan had to wear at least one accessory made from molded marzipan, often a hat or a brooch, replaced daily as it became too soft or temptingly sweet-smelling. Dreamlike annual festivals drew travelers from every corner. Artisans would build a city-sized automaton of marzipan and ginger, wind it up with candied shells, and let it parade, limb by limb, through the gumdrop-lined avenues. In the salted caramel marauders' coastal realm, peculiarity was an honored tradition. Marauders decorated their salt-crusted coats with prize charms, fossilized sugar ammonites, chocolate sea glass, and spiky brine candies. They believed the sea itself had moods, so before embarking on raids, or in brighter times, rescue missions, sailors would consult jars of swirling salt water, reading the patterns of caramel eddies to determine fortune. As a test of courage, young marauders sometimes swam through the sea of cream with only a burnt caramel paddle, chased by friendly licorice eels trained to obey trumpet blasts. Communal feasts took place on bobbing gingerbread platforms. No land beneath one's feet was thought to taste as sweet as that atop an unpredictable sweet tide. The custard seers reveled in strange ritual, their days mixed with meditation, scientific inquiry, and a perpetual dose of mysticism. Breakfast was never eaten alone. Every seer left a portion of their silky vanilla custard on the window ledge for passing birds. Their cooking fires glowed with enchanted jelly beans, each color burning with a different scent. The order in which a seer added beans to the hearth was as vital as choosing ingredients for a spell. Prophetic visions came in trance-like dances, where the seers would spin in circles, eyes closed, tracing signs with custard-tipped wands, as attending apprentices captured every move in a cloud of powdered cinnamon and clove. The wind chime pipers began their daily routine before sunrise, harvesting dew-filled reeds and caramelized sugar bells for their instruments. Their tents shifted location daily, pegged to whichever breeze sounded sweetest that morning. Clothing was a tapestry of reflective sugar flakes. At dawn, The pipers often appeared as shimmering apparitions, invisible save for the twinkling music that always heralded their approach. Conversations were sung instead of spoken, with arguments dissolving into harmonious duels, the loser deemed out of tune for the day, an honor that bestowed one with the responsibility for brewing the group's signature bittersweet lavender tea. The reborn bitter bakers, now half integrated with the Sweetlands, maintained a life ruled by restoration and ritual. Their villages rested atop ever-shifting layers of burnt sugar, houses suspended on licorice supports. Each morning began with a cleansing. Villagers painted one another's faces with streaks of concentrated bitters, then rinsed the day's start away with honey syrup baths. Meals balanced extremes. Tart lemon scones followed by dabs of chili chocolate. Vinegar-glazed bread followed by strawberry confit. Their wisdom, slowly accepted by other tribes, lay in their frank embrace of struggle and contradiction, and their kitchens, open to all, became famed for late-night discussions as intense as their espresso-infused frostings. The Pebble Taffy gatherers, prideful and practical, embraced the strange through innovation. Each family rigged elaborate pulley systems of candy ropes to traverse the sugarstone cliffs where they lived, and skating on toffee slabs during seasonal migrations surpassed any entertainment known in the Sweetlands. Gatherers celebrated birthdays by challenging the young to a taffy tug, the winner pulling the longest unbroken strand, said to mark how many years of luck they'd gather. Homes were bedecked with chimes, tuned to the key of their family's favorite flavor. At dusk, a chorus of disparate, plunky melodies filled the sky as everyone returned from the mines. High above, the meringue watchers continued their celestial routines, observing and recording. Their libraries, accessible only by staircases of transparent spun sugar, shifted location with the wind. Every watcher bore a quill feather dipped in edible ink, which changed color based on the emotional flavor of the stories they wrote. Each night, watchers sent hand-folded parchment birds aloft. Messages, wishes, and warnings floated downwards, sought eagerly by the tribes below as tokens of hope or signs of coming challenge. Even among the sugarmancers, those shadowy arbiters of light and darkness, strangeness prevailed. Each home was both a laboratory and stage, filled with jars of shadow-infused toffee and mirrors that refracted emotion into ribbons of visible color. Everyday chores became liturgies, sweeping the floor with licorice wands while reciting protective incantations, boiling down sour cherries under moonlight to preserve only their most concentrated notes of regret. Each sugarmancer believed that only by honoring the strange, the bitter, and the sweet in equal measure was one truly a master. So across the Sweetlands, the desert tribes embraced their strangeness, not as flaw, but as the source of vitality. Children from different tribes visited one another on exchange, returning home with strange clothes, stranger manners, and new cravings for peculiar confections. The Sweetlands itself flourished in innovation, festivals that lasted for fortnights, floating markets that vanished with the first wind, and contests where the winner was whoever could craft the most outlandish, harmonious blend of flavors, celebrations of eccentricity, and reminders that true unity thrives not despite strangeness, but because of it. Thus, in a world spun from sugar and dream, the odd and wonderful were woven into the very marrow of life, and with every sunrise, the Sweetlands awoke to new, delicious oddities. The passage of seasons in the Sweetlands unfolded in ways as wildly unpredictable as the lives of the tribes themselves. Change swept the land not only in weather, slurries of lemon snow alternating with maple mist, downpours of sparkling candied rain, or relentless gusts fragrant with star anise, but also in custom and tradition, each cycle introducing bold new oddities, innovative rituals, and peculiar forms of kinship. This was the era when the exchange of oddities became central to life, orchestrated gatherings where tribe members traded their most bizarre habits, utensils, or skills. Some months, a whipped cream nomad would show a pebble taffy gatherer, how to carve a flute from candy glass that called invisible marshmallow birds, while Pebble Taffy children would reciprocate with the art of knotting toffee bands strong enough to anchor a floating home. The marzipan artisans delighted in challenging Meccarin guild members to edible architecture duels, in which competitors built miniature, functional bakeries from nothing but breakfast leftovers and the fleeting dew gathered at dawn. As these exchanges flourished, the Sweetlands witnessed the rise of wandering folk known as the patchworkers, tribal nomads who, having sampled and adopted lifestyles from across the land, delighted in synthesizing new traditions. Patchworkers might blend macaron-flavored marzipan beads onto their coats, ride caramel skiffs built from salted marauder plans, powered by captured breeze balloons, or balance spinning wind chimes on their hats, ensuring no day passed without a melody. Their homes, tent villages called mosaic camps, sprouted for a week here, a month there, then drifted away, spreading novelty wherever they paused. They were welcomed wherever they traveled, for they acted as both messengers and cultural pollinators, binding the Sweetlands together through delight, curiosity, and laughter. At mid-season, after the exchange of oddities, came the long, bright banquet, a festival whose nightly feasts grew more riotous and wild each year. Tribes gathered near the glowing heart of sweetness to present performances and inventions that tested the boundary between genius and absurdity. Once, a team of custard seers fashioned dancing golems from aged lemon curd that sang prophecies in four-part harmony. Another year, a sugarmancer illusionist turned the entire central square into a living board game, where players moved by composing riddles that made their shadow avatars perform acrobatic pirouettes. The winners, often those who failed most spectacularly, earned the right to set the oddest rule for the coming year, their names celebrated in spun sugar banners that shimmered in the warm glow. Amidst exuberance, new forms of connection blossomed. Mixed tribe kinships arose, bound by chosen bonds rather than heritage, marked by shared handkerchiefs stitched with candied thread or tokens crafted from rare jellied fruits plucked in teams. It was now common for a marauder to wed an artisan in a ceremony involving competitive recipe recitations, or for a seer to adopt a gatherer child, passing on visions through symbolism expressed in abstract pastry paintings. The marzipan artisans, ever inventive, developed living sculptures, great trees or animals crafted from doughs seeded with friendly yeasts, subtly shifting shape and color through the day and humming with songs learned from the wind chime pipers. The watchers above were fascinated, increasing their nightly flights to glimmering pyres set in the global mosaic camps, returning with tales ever more outlandish and detailed. Some watchers even rebelled against custom, joining the patchworkers for a season, returning only when a particularly strange and delightful event begged chronicling. The bitter bakers, now living at the very edge of the Sweetlands, and feeling their way back toward trust and community, engineered a new art, the ceremony of contrasts. Each month, they would challenge any tribe to a culinary duel of opposites, resulting in innovations such as bitter caramel cloud floats, pickled cherry eclairs, or soot-black licorice with fiery pink grapefruit curd. The joy of wonder and the thrill of culinary suspense drew crowds from every corner. Even the most stubborn craved a taste. All this novelty inspired a radical invention, the establishment of the Night of Many Doors. On this night, every home, houseboat, tent, gallery, or spire opened its doors, offering a single unusual treat or experience to travelers. No home could repeat the same delight from the year before, and guests would roam from door to door, sometimes finding themselves asked to compose a poem in meringue, balance a tower of pepper biscuits, or dance the spiral sunrise quadrille on beds of jelly cubes. The laughter and camaraderie woven in these shared adventures became the strongest weaving of all, encircling the Sweetlands with invisible threads of kinship. Life was, of course, not without the unexpected. Storms of flavor off, would sometimes erupt. A sudden wind would carry a pungent, unfamiliar spice across the land, challenging tribes to adapt or blend it before it altered their favorite treats forever. On one notorious occasion, a rain of iridescent violet licorice seeds altered a fifth of the fields for weeks, resulting in a burst of new recipes, purple-gloved hands, and a temporary craze for bread that glowed faintly in the dark. The pebble taffy gatherers, spurred by patchworker visitors, pioneered the first reverse mining. Instead of carving out the ancient sugarstone cliffs, they began to deposit new, experimental veins grown from layered syrup and rare botanicals. In years to come, these would serve as living libraries, preserving histories and flavor genealogies in sweet mineral code. So it was that the Sweetlands, once a collection of disparate, peculiar tribes, evolved into a single, endlessly variable world, founded on the principle that the delight of each day's oddity was the seed for tomorrow's wonder. Unpredictable, paradoxical, and beautiful, the strange lifestyles of the desert tribes spun further outward, promising that whatever else came, the next sunrise over the Sweetlands would bring a world yet stranger, and ever more wonderful than the dreams that shaped it. The Sweetlands, for all their wonders, were lands of challenge as much as delight. While their skies dazzled violet at dusk and rivers bubbled with dreams of caramel, every tribe knew that sweetness lived side by side with threat. The first and most persistent hardship was scarcity, not of creativity, but of balance and vital resources. In a land defined by endless invention, drought came not as a lack of water, but as a strange sugar fade. Whole valleys would wake to find their flavors muted, vanilla meadows gone bland, the wind carrying no aroma but cold emptiness. The whipped cream nomads, so attuned to currents and clouds, would feel their floating homes lose buoyancy, tilting perilously close to the ground until hunters and gatherers worked together to summon lost breezes. Sometimes only after a collective effort, rituals of song, mixing the oldest stockpiled syrups with fresh dew and gifting sweets to neighboring tribes, would flavor return, the landscape blossoming with grateful color. The pebble taffy gatherers faced perils of exhaustion beneath the sugarstone cliffs. Mines would collapse if worked too greedily, and the toffee veins could dry if seasons of overharvesting went unchecked. Too often, competition grew fierce, and disputes over ownership or technique soured relations. It was here that the Makaran Guild and Wind Chime Pipers stepped in as mediators, blending diplomacy with creative games, ensuring that hardship bred invention rather than strife. But the most formidable challenge came in the form of the shadow seasons, periods when bitterness or envy, born from old grievances or unsettled disputes, spread across the land like a creeping cold. During these months, even the sun seemed dim, fruit withered, and laughter faded. Tribes would huddle close, whispering stories of harmony, and work tirelessly to rekindle the fires of unity. These were times when the watcher's tail birds flew endlessly, bringing hope and reminders that challenge, too, was part of the tapestry of sweetness. With unity hard-won and always fragile, the Sweetlands endured their gravest hardship yet, the first appearance of the devouring blight. This insidious phenomenon, born of imbalance and neglect, spread silently through crops and confections, draining colors and warping flavors until entire harvests crumbled into powdery gray. The marzipan artisans, whose edible city walls began to soften and crumble, despaired as even their skillful repairs failed. Schools and festivals shuddered as the heart of culture seemed ready to collapse. This calamity forced the tribes to confront not only environmental, but social rupture. Suspicion grew. Had one tribe's greed or magic summoned the blight? Old fears re-emerged. Marauders and pipers quarreled over weather reading. Gatherers accused seers of withholding vision. Within this fog of doubt, Lyra, a now mature custard seer, led a movement to reconnect the tribes through a ritual known as the blending. Delegations from every kinship wove together the last healthy stores of their native sweets, cooling knowledge and flavor, risking the remainder of their fortunes. At the ritual's peak, the sugarmancers revealed their greatest secret, a potion of shadow and light, extracted from forgotten roots and rare frostings, which, if cast with humility, could rekindle life. The process was excruciating. Tribes endured days of hunger and fear, their traditions tested by necessity. But as the final blend was cast, a rainbow of color and flavor rippled outward, flooding the sweetlands with renewal. Out of hardship grew understanding. The sweetland's equilibrium could not be passively guarded, but must be actively rebuilt, generation after generation, through both hardship and celebration. Hardship never disappeared from the sweetlands, but their struggles transformed into enduring sources of wisdom. Droughts grew more frequent as distant lands pressed in, and the tribes became masters of adaptation. Innovation burst in the strangest places. The nomads learned to harvest flavors from fog. The gatherers developed living taffy that regenerated between seasons. The seers mixed herbs for resilience. The marauders built flavor-reserving fleets that could cross even the sourest storms. Yet perhaps the deepest challenge was the encroachment of outside ways. Lore arrived of realms beyond sweetness, of sourness and sensation unfamiliar, tempting some youth to wander out or return bearing ideas that jarred tradition. At first, these visitors caused confusion. Makaran cycles disrupted, artisans baffled by new tools, children preferring imported, mysterious flake confections to ancestral treats. Through struggle, they found synthesis, annual feast of the New World, where tribes welcomed the wildest inventions, both from within and without. Old and new flavors collided and fused, honoring both roots and possibility. When new hardships arose, changing weather, new blights, the loss of elders, the solution was not isolation, but a wild, inclusive inventiveness. As the sweetlands evolved, the desert tribes carried hardship as stories and symbols, bitter spikes woven proudly into festival crowns. Empty flavor jars displayed alongside the freshest confections, every struggle honored without shame. Across their edible hills, challenge became as essential to identity as sweetness itself, ensuring that, even if the world grew ever stranger, the tribes would continue to flourish, undaunted, united, and magnificently alive.